What's up, guys? It seems like things are just getting worse and worse for the ride-sharing app Uber recently.
Now, if you don't know what the hell Uber is, it's best to just start out with ride-sharing in general.
Yeah, a few years back, someone had the brilliant idea to subvert the long-standing tradition of using an antiquated transportation service known as the taxi cab industry, which, as anyone who's ridden in a cab in the past decade or so knows, was and still is broken as far as customer service and technology goes.
Oh yeah, especially here in this town.
Yes.
Never, not even once. The main problem with cabs for the most part is the substandard service, the shitty quality of the cars, and the fact that it's just not that easy to pay for. Even to this day, you primarily need to have cash on hand if you want to use a cab and not get yelled at. Cabs are more frequently offering the ability to use credit cards as a form of payment, but as most of us know, utilizing this feature is frowned upon by the drivers who would more often than not prefer cash and have been known to get openly upset when forced to do otherwise.
Yes, we've had lots of experience.
I've had many experiences.
Enter ride services like Uber, Sidecar, and Lyft, who let you download an app to your phone, enter in your credit card information upon installation, and use that as your payment from there on out. Nothing ever exchanges hands with the driver, and it's incredibly simple to use.
But the best part is, you don't have to luck out with trying to wave down a cab and hope that there are even cabs to wave down in your area. Aside from New York or Chicago and such, where there's cabs everywhere. Yeah. It's not a problem. You also don't need to contact a cab company over the phone, sit on hold, tell them your location, and wait and hope for an extended period of time for that driver to maybe show up.
Yeah, I've had plenty of times where they just don't show up at all. It sounds great, right? These apps sound great. Well, not for the cab companies whose lobbyists have pressured cities to shut down access to these new ride-sharing apps nearly every step of the way. But that's a whole different subject. Yeah. You can actually watch a recent episode of South Park, which does a brilliant satirical portrayal of this issue. So if you want, you can actually go watch that.
Yeah, they nailed it.
Yep.
For now, we're just gonna focus on Uber, the once loved company who basically spearheaded the entire new movement, but have recently found themselves in an increasingly bad spot with not only their customers, but with their drivers as well.
Let's start out with surge pricing, because this seems to be affecting the most amount of people. Now, Uber isn't alone on this front. Lyft also does their own version of surge pricing, but no one is more notorious for completely vicious and outrageous pricing during these times than Uber.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that Sidecar does not do surge pricing, but their system is way different. It's based off of fare quotes that the individual drivers come up with and give to you, and you're basically presented with a list of cars. They're like, okay, this one's $20, this one's $5.
Yeah.
And here's how long it'll take to get there.
Yeah, so it's up to you to decide if you want that service or not.
Yeah.
But again, Uber has publicly seen the backlash worse than anyone. So let's go over a few examples of this and why it hurts their brand overall.
So back in 2012, Hurricane Sandy affected New York City heavily, and as a result of that weather emergency, Uber enacted surge pricing due to high demand. And guess what? People were outraged.
Yep.
Uber later struck a deal with state officials to cap prices during emergency situations. So, I mean, growing pains, I guess, but it was still very, very bad PR.
Yeah. Jump ahead to this past Halloween, where a man from Denver was charged $539 for an 18-mile ride home during peak holiday hours. For that price, the guy could have flown round trip to pretty much any major airport, or probably even gotten a limo with one of those awesome hot tubs in the back to take him home instead. Maybe even, as some news outlets reported, he could have chartered his own private helicopter flight home instead of taking an Uber. So,
oh man. Also this past Halloween, a college-aged girl took a 20-minute or so ride home and was charged $362 and could no longer pay her rent because of the charge. She actually started a GoFundMe site which got donations to help her pay for the charge, which it successfully did.
We know what you're thinking, and you're right. In our opinion, these people should have known better. I mean, Uber clearly states that you'll be charged a certain percentage over what the normal rate is, and it has tools in place so that you have to confirm that you will pay the rate. And about the girl starting a funding page for that,
fuck you.
That's wrong. I just think that's wrong, because you should learn from your mistakes, and people shouldn't have to bail you out of situations. It's her fault that this happened. Yes, the surge pricing does suck, but this basically falls on her shoulders. And those donations could have gone to something way more worthwhile than bailing a girl out. But even so, there's like very vague stuff with the predictions of how much it's gonna cost. You can do fare quotes now on Uber, but you know, doing the math when you're drunk after Halloween,
not gonna happen.
It's not a smart thing to do. But like I said, this specific problem falls on the customers, not on Uber themselves. You could take a normal cab, or you could find a ride with friends or something like that.
Yeah, obviously if they say like this will cost 10 times as much as it usually would, you should be
probably
ready to shell out some money.
Not at all. But we digress. It does suck. It sucks for both sides, for the drivers who have to make money too. So when there is a high surge in demand, there will be a surge in price. But a lot of these cases seem predatory at the very least. Either way you slice it, bad PR for the company is bad PR for the company.
Moving on from surge pricing, earlier this year it was an unintentional jab at its own drivers that upset some people. Uber's CEO stated at a tech conference that eventually its drivers would be replaced by autonomous vehicle navigation systems, self-driving cars.
Yeah.
Well, as much as we can assume that for now, I mean, it's basically science fiction.
Yeah, but these things are being developed by other Silicon Valley companies, and although it isn't in the very near future, it could and probably will happen one day. That day meaning who the hell knows, but Uber drivers didn't like it and lashed out again.
I don't think that one's that bad.
Yeah.
It's insensitive
Yeah.
to his employees, but I don't think
But then more recently, there were nationwide protests from drivers who feel they are being treated unfairly due to the competition for lower prices as Uber goes head-to-head with similar apps like Lyft. According to the drivers, these lowered prices equal lower pay for them, and they are taking the hit from the discounts even though nothing they've done has changed. And they're urging Uber to allow tipping for drivers so they can be better compensated. Now, for the record, Lyft has always had this feature prominently displayed for tipping, and we've both used this feature. It's nice to give a good driver something extra and having the ability to do that.
especially if it's late at night.
Yeah.
I usually give them like $2.
They take you through the Taco Bell drive-thru. They've earned a couple bucks
done
extra
that.
there. Yeah.
Next is safety for the passengers. There have been numerous reports of physical and verbal abuse towards passengers, and even one case of an alleged kidnapping.
In January of this year, an Uber driver in San Francisco tragically hit and killed a 6-year-old girl, and Uber took no responsibility for the case, even after it came to light that the contracted driver already had a reckless driving conviction, which Uber failed to uncover during his initial background check.
And then in June, an Uber driver physically assaulted a passenger, and it was also revealed that that driver was on probation for a battery charge. Another misstep in their background check process, apparently.
Then a man in his mid-30s was hit by an Uber driver with a hammer, which resulted in a fractured skull and loss of eyesight. Uber refunded his bill a week later, so bravo.
Well, good job, Uber. As recently as last month, a woman attempted to take an Uber home and claimed she was instead driven to an isolated parking lot 20 miles away from her destination in the middle of the night and was only finally driven home after causing a scene and screaming. But the ordeal allegedly lasted over 2 hours. Uber partially refunded her fare due to the inefficient route.
So yeah, not the best track record there either. But again, we should point out that the drivers for these rideshare companies are basically contractors. And although Uber, they should be doing background checks on these people, but it seems like they're just signing up, getting the app, and heading out onto the road before they've been screened by the company completely and thoroughly.
Yeah, there have also been reports of Uber attempting to sabotage its competitors by booking rides with apps like Lyft, and then backing out of them at the last minute, which wastes their time and potential earnings.
There have also been reports of Uber paying people to take short rides with Lyft, and while on the ride, attempting to convince the driver to ditch Lyft for a job with Uber.
Unrelated to that, but still pretty creepy, is the news that corporate employees have access to a feature called God View. This God View is supposedly widely available to employees, but not drivers, to track the location of drivers at any point in time, and also see customers' locations from pickup to drop-off.
This data has also been used to report on hookup culture, finding that based on drop-off and pickup locations at certain times of the night and morning, that Boston is the biggest city for walks of shame, or as they're calling it, rides of glory.
All right. Now let's get into the most recent development in this whole thing. There was a post on the site Pando Daily by writer Sarah Lacy, which highlighted her thoughts on a different story about Uber, in which she says they attempted to pair hot chick drivers with potential customers.
The promotion was with a French company and would enlist models to drive you around as part of its deal.
After expressing her concerns with this promotion, Uber's senior VP came up with his own idea on how to deal with journalists at a recent dinner where members of the press were invited.
It's supposed to be off record, but this is what came out of it. At the dinner, senior VP Emil Michael was quoted by a member of BuzzFeed News, outlined the notion of spending $1 million to hire opposition researchers that could help Uber fight back against the press by looking into their personal lives and families, thus giving the media a taste of its own medicine, and targeted one journalist in particular, Sarah Lacy of Pando Daily.
Yeah, that's creepy. He then had to publicly address the claims in a statement through an Uber spokeswoman. The remarks attributed to me at a private dinner born out of frustration during an informal debate over what I feel is sensationalistic media coverage of the company I am proud to work for do not reflect my actual views and have no relation to the company's views or approach. They were wrong no matter the circumstance, and I regret them.
And for what it's worth, Uber investor Ashton Kutcher also felt the heat of all this by publicly supporting the statements by posting this to his Twitter.
Yeah, what's so wrong about digging up dirt on a shady journalist? Brown. This should be fun. Here comes the part where journalists explain why they should be exempt from ridicule and judgment and probing. Pumped.
But then he wrapped it all up with,
You are all right, and I'm on the wrong side of this ultimately. I just wish journalists were held to the same standards as public figures.
So there you go. That's this whole kind of like drama thing with Uber wrapped up in a nice little nutshell. I mean, since we've been reading about it and we're both early adopters in ride-sharing technology because of where we live, we were definitely interested in reporting on it. Like, it's a thing that we use. I use it multiple times a week.
Yeah.
I don't own a car. I usually take public transit, but if I want to go out on a Friday night or something like that, it's very convenient and easy to use. I primarily use Lyft because it's a little bit cheaper here.
Yeah.
From what I've found.
Same.
But I have used Uber in the past. And I haven't had any problems with it. Everyone's been super
The
nice
worst
every
I've
time.
had is a driver who's a little too talkative.
Yeah, those are always
dude,
pretty
I just
bad.
want to close my eyes I haven't been taken to a secluded area to be murdered.
No.
But anyway, where does this put you, the viewer, on the whole thing? Are these apps even available where you live? And if so, have you used them, and which one is your favorite?
Have you ever had a bad experience? Like I said, we've used all three of them, and they're much easier than a cab for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, like we said before, this is our own evidence, but none of us have had really a problem with any of these services, really. I was charged the surge pricing on Halloween, but it wasn't astronomical.
Yeah.
It was double, I think, the price, but I've seen stuff go as high as 8 or 10 times the rate that you're supposed to do. So,
But just because our experiences have been good, that doesn't excuse the actions of people within their community, nor the handling of the business by its employees if any of these reports are true.
yeah. So there you have it. Come up with your own conclusions and let us know in the comments like I said, if you use this stuff and what your experiences are with it.
Yeah, is this just like a big city problem?
It's just one of those big city problems.